Welcome, everybody. Happy Monday. So this is Sue Grinnell, and I'm with the Public Health Institute. And I'm going to go ahead and ask you to put yourselves on mute if you're not talking. We, of course, want to encourage a lot of dialogue, but, just to minimize any noise. And I'd like to ask for folks to go ahead and put in the chat box your name and where you're from. We have and we'll have a mixed group today of a couple of different groups who are working on community collaborations to improve health. And so you may not necessarily all know each other. Today is a first discussion in a series of discussions that we're doing with our community of practice group around community engagement. This first discussion is on earned media. It's Earned Media 101, and I'm very excited about this. I actually was doing this a number of years ago, and I had no idea what it was until someone told me, oh, that's what you're doing. And for me, it proved to be quite valuable in my work at a local health department and just gaining really positive press and having a great relationship with the media. So this is a first in a series of many discussions that we believe are going to be helpful to your work in your community. We thought it would be good to start off with the earned media as you're beginning to think about your community and or resident engagement, thinking about how could you develop relationships and use this to your advantage to really tell some of the good stories that are happening in your community, where you're trying to draw attention to. There's lots of great stuff that's going on, and I think this, given that it's earned and you don't have to pay for it, is a big one. I think that has a lot of value. It also can demonstrate some of the value of the work you and your partners are doing together. So I just think that that's an important piece. The next session that we're going to be doing is on asset-based community development. So that'll be providing an overview of what that methodology is. So he'll be sharing that. Ron is who's going to be doing that. The next session that we're doing is sharing a methodology called Photo Voice, where you actually will learn how you can actually take pictures of hopefully positive things that are happening in your community and where you might want to draw attention to those. In between that first session and the second session, we're asking people to go out and actually take pictures in your community. And then the second session on the 9th, we'll be sharing those. And Joanna, who's going to be doing this, there's a methodology with Photo Voice of how you actually look at the pictures. And really it's about telling a story. Oftentimes it can be for policy work, but it also can be to draw attention really to about what's going on. We are then going to be having 2 in-person, one in Northern California, one in Southern California, really focused in on this asset-based community development. So honing in on what is that. And then I'm still working on this last one, and it's a methodology called participatory budgeting, which I think Tom is aware of. And it's really a way where you can engage your community residents in making decisions around how money gets spent. So I think particular through the CACHI sites, the Accountable Community for Health sites, that's an important methodology to be aware of. And really our intent is to give you tools and methodologies that you can then go out into your communities and try and then come back to the group to share. How is it going? Is it working well? Do you need any other supports? Because we do have funds for coaching support as you're doing this work. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Tom from Shareable. So you can take it away and tell us about Earned Media 101.
Thanks, Sue. Appreciate that. And I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Make sure we can get the view on the PowerPoint. Let's see if this is happening. Great. Is everyone able to see this okay?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, I guess I can do a just quick little introduction to myself. So my name is Tom Llewellyn. I work with Shareable.net. We're a nonprofit media outlet and action network that empowers people to share. We've been around for about a decade. I've been with the organization for the last 5 years. And we do a number of different programs. What we're most noted for is our media work. We have an online magazine. We have about average of around 1 million unique readers per year. We are also active on social media with our media work and promoting other people's pieces kind of as well. And then we do kind of various other programs, including working with policymakers, that's kind of direct advisement, and also writing and distributing policy briefs and model policy. And then we also work with community organizers to start sharing based projects in their communities, like tool libraries and time banks and community gardens and that sort of thing. And I really got into this work through that lens of being kind of hands-on running projects, pop-up community cafes. I co-founded a tool library, a community center with a fabrication lab and a makerspace and co-working and all these sorts of things. And I've also spent years on the road running a traveling roadshow. And what got me really excited about media was some missed media opportunities. In all the years that I co-led this project, 2008 to 2012, called the Sustainable Living Roadshow, we got very little media attention. And we did incredible events wherever we went. We engaged the communities. We brought together all of these various different projects around health and education and sustainability all together for these festivals events, but got very, very little local media attention or national media attention. It was few and far between. I can remember the media that we got, which is, over the course of 5 years, you'd wish that you couldn't remember each piece of media that you got. And so that got me really inspired to do better. And as I started working on new projects like the tool library in Asheville, North Carolina, I saw that as a really great opportunity to reach out and build relationships with the media. And so today, kind of my goal is to go through kind of what it takes to build some of those relationships, what a good media campaign looks like, and kind of a lot of the kind of the nitty-gritty steps of actually how you engage and work with the media. And I guess before we begin, I'm wondering if those on the call can just give me just very quickly any examples of media that you've done before. I mean, this could be in the chat as well, but if you have done some of this work in the past, and also as was said, if there's any specific questions that come up as we go along, please put them in the chat box as well. We're going to be I'll be stopping kind of at each section. There's about 12 different sections to this that I'm going to be going through. So I'm happy to answer questions. And for whatever reason, I am not actually able to see the chat box.
Okay, I'm seeing it. So
okay, great.
I will be the chat queen. So I see press conferences on here. So that's one.
Yeah, that's one. Great.
Yeah, anyone else want to speak up just in terms of
any sort of media? Well, that's all right. We can keep moving on, and I'm sure we'll have questions as we go.
Oh,
what was that?
This is Deborah. Probably
hi, Deborah.
For me to speak to it. So I've done press conferences and press releases for fundraising, special events, for special reports.
Mm-hmm. And there's another one in here too, besides the press conferences, twice monthly columns in our local newspaper.
Gotcha. So we've got some folks that have a fair bit of experience, which is great. So we can kind of get into some of the nuance of this as we go. Great. Reports and emails are always out of date. Okay, so we'll get to this one for sure. Amanda, we'll get to your question. The question was how do we keep up to date on media contacts, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Great. So again, I'm just going to get going. So this is I mentioned shareable.net. This is just a screenshot of our homepage. We cover all sorts of stories and have probably over 3,000 stories at this point in time that we've published in the last few years. And as I mentioned, the kind of one of the first main things that I like to focus on is around the framing of the story. And I feel like that's where a lot of, if you don't start with the right framing, you're not going to get out of it what you're hoping to get. And so the first thing that I find you need to do is ask, what is exactly that story that you want to tell? What are you hoping to achieve from getting that media attention and getting that message out? I had a great experience a number of years ago where I was brought in to lead a campaign in Washington, D.C. around food. And the goal at the time was to run this whole campaign to try and get Michael Taylor pushed out of being the national food safety czar at the FDA. It was kind of like one of those revolving door situations going back and forth between Monsanto and the USDA and the FDA, and got bovine growth hormone approved and GMOs approved and all this different stuff. And he was really a voice for Monsanto that now was in charge of our national food safety. And so the group that brought me in wanted me to coordinate something that was called the Michael Taylor Takeover. And it was incredibly aggressive. It was very niche. Most people didn't know who Michael Taylor was. And so after a little bit of working with them, I went through and kind of reimagined the idea of what we were doing. And the idea was to try and get a bunch of attention around just food policy in general and how that food policy was made. And so what I did is I was like, all right, well, let's figure out what the story is we want to have come out. We want it to make sure that it's showing the diversity of people that care about food, that it's an incredibly family-friendly event, and showing that the movement for kind of food policy change is really family-focused. And so we went through and we changed the framing around from being the Michael Taylor Takeover to being an Eat In at the FDA. And that was very successful. And again, what we did at the beginning before we designed the event, we said, okay, this is the ideal news story that we want to have come out of this event. If we could write the article that would go far and wide, this is what we would want. And then we worked backwards to make sure that every part of the event, everybody that spoke, every sign that was there, every activity that happened, supported and reflected and reinforced that message. And so that was really where that idea of framing really comes in. Because if you don't have that story framed right, then you're going to lose a certain amount of control. You always lose control of the story once the media takes it. But if you can do various things to try and move people in your direction. And so that's that first lesson around framing. And I'm just kind of trying to get back over to that question.
The question that came in from Amanda.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get to that. I'm gonna get to that a little bit later.
Okay.
Around specific, we're gonna press it. Looks like there's nothing. Is there any specific questions around framing, or maybe I'll kind of move forward? Yep. Okay, great. So I'm gonna keep going. So the first thing, once you start your doing your media, is to create that press list. And so that's where this question comes in, is one, how do we generate a press list, and how do we stay on top of it? And there is a number of different services that are out there that you can pay for. Meltwater is one. There's many others that create a whole list of press contacts, especially if you're working locally. You can generate a list that's just all the local media, and it's their job to stay up to date and make sure those contacts are relevant. And they tend to be pretty expensive services, and are often better for organizations that are in kind of larger media markets, or are trying to do media across multiple markets. I found that in most municipalities and areas, you're going to have kind of 5 or so main media outlets that you're looking for, and these might be radio stations or television stations, newspapers that are your like primary media contacts, and then there's sub ones around local blogs and magazines or things that are serving your community. But if just to start, I found it's pretty easy to go through and create a base list of contacts of press that have been in the past, or you think might be interested in the subject that you're doing. And you really don't want to just blanket all media outlets. You want to get, and all reporters, you want to get really specific if you can. And so really niche down, look for past coverage. You can go, if you've got a local newspaper, you can go on to that newspaper, there's a search function, and you can just start searching for keywords that are around topics that you're working on with your organization. And from that, you can see who are the reporters at that newspaper, or that are on the producers that are working on your local TV stations, that sort of thing, that are doing work about your topics already. And then I would really recommend that you start there. Like, those are your best contacts. And then there's some other key points around, how do people get news in your community? Make sure that you're kind of reaching out to, building your list on that, and to get that direct contact information for those reporters if you can, as opposed to just kind of general info at emails, that sort of a thing. And the other thing is that oftentimes lists like this might already exist. You may have already done one that just needs to be updated. There may be some other organization that you're a partner with that has already done this sort of work. If there are other organizations in your community that you see doing media regularly, they would be a good source to reach out to and say, hey, would you be willing to share your press list? And oftentimes organizations will do that, especially if you kind of create a relationship with multiple organizations where, you all have a shared back-end spreadsheet that you are editing, you're updating as you go. You're taking work off of another organization because you're going to update those contacts as they happen. So I would recommend doing that. And again, the other option is to pay for a service. Oftentimes they are $100 to $200 even a month. So you've got to decide how active you're going to be with the media in order to prioritize using a service like that.
Tom, I'm
Yeah.
wondering, there's a couple of questions, but I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. Like, if folks could just put themselves on mute. If you're not talking, that would be great. I'm just looking at this, create a well-organized and shared online spreadsheet. I mean, we use Google Docs a lot. And It's kind of an interesting idea to put out to your group.
Yep.
I don't know if that's kind of like, hey, here's this list, and maybe there's a couple of people who might agree to update it. I don't know if that's
that's that's exactly what I'm saying. So using like a Google spreadsheet where you can build a contact list that you don't necessarily make it a public sheet, but you share it with specific people either within your organization, which or that maybe there's different people in different departments that would want to have access to that and help maintain it. Or like I was saying, oftentimes, maybe there's a partner organization that's been more media savvy than your organization up to this point, and they may be willing to collaborate with you on maintaining a list. There's a number of coalitions and networks that maintain lists together for this region. So there is a track record of doing it in that way.
Yeah. So there was a question that came in regarding the last piece. Would you say framing is similar to the narrative?
Framing is the narrative. Yes, it is related to the narrative that you want to share. And there's a couple things. There's some nuances there, in that you not only are framing your story to fit your narrative and make sure that you're reinforcing that, but you also may be reframing your message depending on what media outlet you're going to, depending on, if you're going to print, or if you're going to television, or if you're going to radio, depending on what the focus of that medium is, or who that reporter is. You might continually to kind of reframe your story to match who you're speaking to. And then also, if you are trying to speak to multiple different communities, again, it's thinking about, okay, not only, am I framing my story right to attract the press, but am I framing the story right to reach those who I want to reach through the media? And so that's kind of where that overall story is really important. That's where you are making sure that you are putting front and center the people that you want to connect to. It's kind of some of that inside out storytelling, where you will start a story with a person start some sort of an article or some piece of media with an individual who's directly part of that. So that doesn't always have to mean that individual is telling their own story, but it's a good place to start. By framing a story, that's the human interest. That's how we make connections. And so framing is there's you can do, there are lots of organizations that do all their work around framing like this. And you revise it over and over again, you put it out to multiple people. And for that example with the Michael Taylor takeover, is that for the first 3 weeks after I was hired to do that, I shared it out with a number of people that I wanted to be involved in the action, that I was hoping to coordinate buses or vans. And from the feedback that I got, they said, "Oh no, you need to reformat this, you need to reframe this, or else I'm not going to be able to get people behind it. It's not going to be successful." And so sometimes that we come up with a framing idea, we think it's great in our heads, and it's really important to test that out.
Yeah, that's great.
And so there's a couple of these questions coming in right now that I started to see, and I'm actually gonna get to some of them as we go through the slides.
Great, thanks, you guys. Keep them coming. I think.
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So I'm gonna move on now. So we talked a little bit, and I'm just gonna do a couple of very basics. And it sounds like a number of people have already been have experience with this. But the kind of three pieces that you want when you're doing media is, first, you got to have a press release. You got to have something with the basic ideas of what your event or your action or your project or whatever it is, and to be able to send that. And you typically want to do 2 press releases. One of them is, a ways out if you're doing an event or something, so there's time to promote it ahead of time, and this helps you get into calendars or get other people to kind of pick up the story. Sometimes you can get this thing is coming kind of news story, especially not as much on television, but you can get local previews and in weeklies and that sort of thing. And then the second one would be on the day of your event. And you would put that out at the morning of. And the idea is that you really want to do the reporter's job for them, is that you kind of cover all the details. You typically write them, and so it's almost in the form of an article. Again, that's where that framing really comes in as well, where you want to kind of write down all the things that are going on. Any sort of opinions should come in the form of quotes. From noted people, either people that are speaking at the event or people that are part of your organization, any sort of experts that you can have. You make the rest of the press release really as objective as possible. And then oftentimes reporters will take those press releases, and they'll either make them be interested or not to be able to come to your event, or 2, oftentimes they just reform. If they're just doing a quick and dirty piece, they will reformat the press release that you've sent out using those direct quotes that you've included, typically. And so that happens quite a bit. So you are doing the job for the reporters. And after this, I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm going to send out a number of kind of different assets, and we'll be sharing these slides. We'll be sharing the recording of this video, and we'll also be sharing a couple of templates, one for a press release, and one for a media advisory. So the media advisory is really that kind of who, what, where, when, and why about the event. It's the very, very basics. And this is something that, again, we said, you want to send out that press release a few weeks in advance, and then the second one the day of. Well, this is something that you do a few days before your event. It's just the very bare bones details, because this is what you would use to try and attract somebody from the press to come to your event. And one of the things that you want to have in there is some of, and this was brought up as well in the chat, is that you want to have some sort of a hook. This is your opportunity to sell your story. So what is something that is going to either showing impact is here for your community, that is going to bring in ratings somehow. Is it tied into some other news story that's already happening, or some other issue in the community where there's already been interest? Are you going to have some sort of incredible visuals? Is there going to be performances? Are there going to be giant puppets? Whatever the thing is that's going to make it unique and visual, especially if you're trying to encourage television to come, it has to be really, really visual. Television is a visual medium. And so that's your opportunity to kind of lay out in exact terms. I mean, and really, in the template I'll send out, there is a who, a what, a where, a when, and a why, and you fill out each one to make it really clear and easy for a reporter to read it and understand it and decide whether they want to come or not. Mm-hmm.
Great.
And one other thing, another kind of asset that's worth noticing, is a letter to a producer if you're planning on doing television. And this is just kind of it's small, you don't have to read all the things, excuse me. But the idea is that if you were contacting a producer and this one's done in the third person, so this is somebody who's advocating for an author to be able to get on television. But it's the type of thing that you would write, and this is, again, you'd want to try and find that producer's contact. If you can, oftentimes you do kind of a really roundabout way to find these contacts, because this is if you want to get on television, you're trying to get in touch with like a producer of a morning segment or something else like that. Oftentimes you can find out who is producing those segments, but you can't find their contact information. Their email's not going to be on the website. So you can call the media outlet and just call the general number and ask for the contact information for that person. You can tell who's ever running the service desk, tell them why you want it, and you can get it. Once you find out the person's name, you can oftentimes do a Google search and find out an email address for that person. And if you're able to find other email addresses for that media outlet, you can often figure out what that person's email address might be. First name, last name, or first or initial, or whatever else may be. And the idea is that you want to try and send some sort of a letter as directly as possible to the people that are making the decisions about what type of show is on there. So in this article, there's in this clip, it says, there isn't that kind of introduction, hello, blank, but you would say, this is this person, this is what they do, this is their book or their hook, whatever the thing is that they have that's going on, and these are some of the lessons about it, and this is why this thing is specifically unique. And then have a series of specific segment ideas. Let's saying, hey, these are different things that you might want to include that we've thought about already, that we're going to be able to show up with an idea so you don't have to do all the work yourself. These are different segments that might be of interest to you. And then say, hey, open to other ideas that you might have as well. And here's a link to various media clips. And thank you so much. I look forward to hearing from you. Very, very basic, but important. Just wondering if there's any other.
There was some
things,
going
yeah.
back and forth just regarding op-eds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, media care about ratings and community impact as an organization. Yep. Should we try to sell the media that's covering our organization will bring in those ratings / community impact? Great question. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was talking about the selling, so it's not necessarily selling on bringing in ratings, but just knowing what types of things do bring in ratings. That's where that visual content comes in, making sure that it's something that's interesting to the community, that is going to be visually pleasing and unique in some way, and when possible, connecting to some sort of a news story which has already been covered in the past, or something that's emergent, that's happening right now in the community.
Mm-hmm. And that makes me think, Tom, when you said that, if there's one view of the story is being able to, if there's another view, maybe
Yep.
being shared that you all have, familiarity with, or maybe even a person who's experiencing it. Anyway, that made me, because sometimes it's the negative and not,
Yeah.
positive. So
Yeah.
that's great.
So you're able to present a competing or alternative narrative, and find some sort of a complementary story that adds, like you're saying, that adds a different angle that maybe wasn't being seen, that wasn't being presented to begin with. So that's a great hook to do. And then on the op-eds, if you have some sort of I'm just trying to quickly read the rest of that comment there. The comment is, our local newspaper columns are both op-eds. A column from our health officer publishes the second week of the month. A follow-up column about something we do related to HO's column is highlighted by the department's manager and publishes in the fourth week of each month. So that's one great way. If you're able to build a relationship with a paper and have regular media attention, that's an incredible way to go. I mean, that just builds, you not only are continuing to build a relationship, but you are establishing yourself as an expert in the field, and you're able to regularly reinforce your message and support whatever you're doing at the time, but through that medium. That is something that is definitely possible, but also not the easiest thing to do. I will say that in some ways it is easier now than it has been before, because newsrooms have shrunk so much that there is a need for content that is kind of low lift for the papers, where someone can just do a quick edit or not and be able to fill columns. So when possible, that's a great example of a way to get in the media and regularly. Kind of one thing that I wanted to connect to follow up on both the press release and the media advisory and your letters to a producer is that you got to follow up directly. One, like I said before, you want to try and get that direct contact by email to send in those press releases. That's definitely the preferred way for reporters to get them. They don't necessarily want to get a physical copy. And if you send it to an info ad or some general thing, it's a very low chance that that's going to end up in the hands that you're hoping it will be. So you got to get that email to begin with. And again, you just kind of have to call the service desk or anything else to be able to get that contact information. And then once you've sent in your press release, within a couple of hours, you typically want to do a follow-up call. It's very important to call, and most likely the reporter will not have seen your press release yet. They're busy. They're as busy as you are, if not busier, and it's still going to be in their email. And so one, just be really respectful. Don't expect them to have read it already. When you make your phone call, leave a message if you need to, but then call back again. You don't have to, just because you left a message, there's a low chance that they're going to get back to you. So feel free to call back a second time the next day. And right away, make sure that you confirm that they received your release. Oftentimes they'll open it while you're on the phone with them. And also say, hey, is there anybody else at the paper that I should be talking to? Maybe you don't have the right contact. Maybe they're not covering that beat anymore, but somebody else is. So be sure to kind of use the time that you have. It'll be very short, but to do as much fact-finding as you can. And then also, especially after the event has happened, or again, if this is not necessarily related to an event, but just related to your work in general, provide the media as many quality media assets as you can. So these are photos, these are interview contacts, they may be quotes that you've already gathered. If you have specific facts and figures, if you've done a report recently, if you're able to send them, the executive summary, whatever those basics are that are going to make it so that they can put together their piece as quickly and as efficiently as possible, it's more likely that's going to happen. And also knowing that, when you're on the phone with them, like, this is your chance to pitch that event. So having those kind of unique things that you're selling, again, when we get back to selling it, this is your opportunity. When they pick up on the phone, you have 2 minutes, and then they're going to have to go after that. So you got to be really succinct, and you got to be ready, because they're not going to have more than 2 minutes for you.
Yeah. That's great. Tom, there's another, I think it's related to this. Yep. As an organization, should we offer exclusivity to a particular station in order to guarantee we get airtime, or should the goal be to get as much coverage as possible from a wide range of outlets?
Yep. So, you could offer exclusivity on an aspect of the story, but I would not offer exclusivity on the entire story. So if you can break your story into different message chunks that would make sense to be unique stories that then are funneling back to supporting the whole, then I would recommend that. And that's actually something I'm going to get to towards the end about how to keep the story alive, because that's a great way to do that. Is you can emphasize different aspects of whatever your story is through different mediums. And again, it might be, what is the most appropriate medium? So as we talk about, television is very visual. If you're getting on the radio, like, the story about the giant puppets and whatever else isn't going to be nearly as interesting, because the people that are listening aren't going to be able to see them. So you kind of want to be able to format that as to the right outlets. So again, just as you're kind of leading up towards your event or whatever it is, that hook, and I use the word event pretty loosely, because the event that you have can be the launching of a new website, the launching of a new program, the releasing of a report that you've done, some study, anything. It can actually be a physical event as well. It could be a press conference. It could be different things like that. But leading up to when you're hoping to get your media attention, when that anchor thing is taking place that you are working your media off of, and you typically do want to have some sort of an anchor opportunity. Why does the story need to be told right now? Because that'll be more compelling. And one of the reasons why we've done this webinar now is because as we move into doing the kind of community asset mapping, the photo voice, some of the participatory budgeting, every single one of these moments, these other different things that we're going to be doing throughout this series are going to be moments where you could get media attention. Definitely with the release of the photo voice, or then what you want to do with that. The photo voice is going to be an incredible opportunity because, again, there's going to be so many great visuals that are going to come from that project. And if there is some sort of a community event that you do around that, or some sort of a open meeting around participatory budgeting, and you'll learn more about what that is later. Again, that's another great opportunity to get media. So what we're working on now is just kind of get your base understanding, so that then when you go to work on these other projects, you have this kind of running in the back of your mind. What is this going to look like? How am I going to be able to frame this for the media? What is the story that I'm going to want to tell? And these things are all going to feed towards that. So you're going to be able to use these opportunities coming up as case studies to practice this. So one of the things that's necessary is even before you write your press release and work on your media advisory, is to come up with that 4 to 8 weeks beforehand. That's where you would start with your publicity plan. And so the first thing to do is to create that media list if you don't have it already. I mean, you could do that whenever. If you are doing some sort of an event, that's when you want to create your online event page and get that out. And once you have your event page and a landing place for somebody to go, the information, all that sort of thing, that's when you can send out your first press release. And because you'll be ready, because if they do media, you want to have a place for people to go to find out more information. And this is also the opportunity that you would want to be submitting to community calendars, post on social media, kind of sharing the story in any of the kind of open places where you can post your information, message boards, all that sort of thing. A week before the event, this is when you start thinking about your media advisory. So, if your event is, this could be, if your event was on the weekend, you would want to start sending that out on Monday. This is typically, I say here kind of a week before the event, but this is just the kind of things you start thinking about. But I wouldn't necessarily send out my media advisory on a Friday if the event wasn't until the following Thursday. I would send that out on Monday. And you want to give enough of a lead time so that whoever you're sending to can try and schedule somebody to go, but not too far out that it just kind of gets lost. So again, you send that advisory, you make your follow-up call, make sure that it's been received. Again, this is another opportunity to try and sell your story. And this is another moment where you can tell them, hey, like, I really hope you can come. If you're interested in the story and you can't come, let me know, and I will be sure to make sure you get a whole set of media, pictures and quotes and everything else like that, so you can write a quote. You can write a story after the fact. And if there's any kind of news outlets that you're trying to get into to do an advanced story, this is also, you want to make sure you get this to them. This could be a week or two beforehand to try and get on their schedule to get a piece. And so if you're trying to get on the radio ahead of time, anything else like that, that's when you want to send that out. And that's what you would typically use. And then 2 to 3 business days beforehand, we would say, yeah, resend that advisory again. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And, especially if you have any kind of updates that have happened, you've got some new speaker confirmed, or, now another partner has just come join us. Whatever you can add that's something new, put that in there, and then do another round of follow-up calls, and ask them specifically if they're planning on coming, saying, hey, I've sent you the press release, I sent you a media advisory, I've had 3 conversations with you, like, are you planning on coming? Want to let you know that our media advisory our media liaison is going to look for you. Like, we'll make sure you get the right information. We'll help introduce you to people to do interviews, the whole thing. Again, you're really trying to make their job as easy as possible, and you're trying to make sure that you can, again, control the story in some way, because you're going to want to have certain people that are going to be speaking on the behalf of your organization, on the behalf of what you're doing. And so this is just an opportunity to make sure, you're looking for this person from the local paper, from the TV station, what have you, so you can direct them to where you want them to go. And then the day of the event, this is when you want to have, if possible, have and I'm going to go into the media liaison job next and that role, but if this is actually a physical event that's happening, have a media sign-in sheet that has kind of name, contact information, outlet, and keep documents, because it kind of gets lost sometimes in the day. You maybe talk to 3 or 4 reporters. Oh, I thought they were from there. I'm not sure where they were. The whole thing, and you're going to want to be able to follow up with people afterwards, and also know, because when you're doing your follow-up, you want to do different follow-up with reporters that were on site at the event and reporters that weren't. And as you're trying to build a relationship and make these connections to these reporters, you don't want to send out information that's not relevant. You don't want to tell some reporter that you've been talking to on the phone for the last month and a half that then you talk to at the event. You don't want to send them an email saying, hey, I'm sorry you weren't able to make it to the event, but here's all the stuff. You want to say again, hey, thanks for making it to the event, and here's these pieces. And it's just how you want to just kind of continue to relate and build relationships, just like you would with any other organization or partner or funder or anything else like that. So also on the day of the event, you want to have some physical copies of your press release. And I mentioned earlier, that it's not the appreciated standard practice to mail in or drop off a physical press release at some sort of media outlet. But at the event itself, it's a great idea because there may be some new media that you haven't interacted with up to this point, that's just shown up. You want to reinforce it. So you want to have physical copies of your latest press release, the one that you created for the day of, which is, again, telling the story pretty much as if it already happened, even though you already have it, scripted out that morning.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have enough material, you want to create that kind of that press asset list with pictures and brochures and everything else like that. So you can say, here's the folder, here's the package. I'm going to email this to you. Thank you for signing in. I will email you this all in digital form, but this is so you can start thinking about it. Here's your physical copy. And that just kind of is just a great way to get them thinking about it and get them moving on that story. So one of the things that you want to be sure that you have is good spokespeople, either for your event or for your project, for your report, anything else like that. And so it's important to create that list of talking points. You're only going to have a few moments to do an interview, and they're only going to excerpt a very small chunk of it. So you got to make sure that every part of what you're saying is on point. That if they only use one sentence, or two sentences from what you said as a quote, that it's going to be things that you want to have out there. And there's a whole art to kind of changing the subject when you're asked a question that you're not comfortable in answering or isn't really getting to the heart of your message. It's skill that some possess. I'm continually trying to work on it. I definitely don't possess it as well as I would like to. But it's important to have those talking points ahead of time, so you've got something to go back to in your mind when you're being interviewed. You're most likely, maybe you'll be holding that sheet, but if you're on television and you're holding that sheet and answering off the thing, it looks bad. So you want to make sure that those that are your spokespeople try to memorize them as much as possible. Really avoid using jargon that you're, especially, it depends on the outlet that you're talking to, but you have to expect that the majority of people that you're speaking to don't have a nuanced understanding of what you're talking about, and don't know about whatever that acronym is for your organization or for that government program or anything else like that. So really try and avoid using jargon as much as possible. And again, remember, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion. And so, it may be taken out of context, it may anything like that. So even when you think maybe you're not on the record, anything you say is on the record, and can be used, especially if there's a camera on. So be prepared. And and to kind of help facilitate this whole process, during your event itself, that's when you want to have that media liaison. And so that's the person that is going to be holding on to all those press releases, that is going to have those media outlets with them, that is going to know where the spokespeople are at all time, that are going to be looking for those reporters and signing them in and making those connections. And it's going to be that person that's running around and kind of managing that media aspect of the event. You don't want the same person. Sometimes it happens that your event coordinator is your spokesperson, your media liaison, is standing up and talking on stage and doing everything at once. And if you have to do it that way, you have to do it that way. But it's much less efficient and less effective to do it that way. And if you can split up some of these roles, when possible, do that. And having somebody that's just thinking about making sure that this media piece is taken care of is really the best way to go. And again, this person maybe is not necessarily the person that's building the relationship over time with the reporters. Like, you can still have, your primary contact that's working on building those relationships. But, on the day of, you can say, hey, I'm doing these other things, but I'm going to connect you to my media liaison that's going to be helping out today. And then maybe that person is the one following up afterwards, or maybe it's you following up afterwards, depending on what the relationship is with that media outlet. And then finally, or not finally, actually, we've got a few more, And I'm going kind of quick through this, but we're going to have a good kind of discussion at the end. I want to talk about some different examples. But the need to make your own media, that's really the only way that you can guarantee that you're going to get media from your action or from your report or whatever else it is. And so, turn that press release that you've written into your blog. Write that op-ed and send that to the paper and try and build a relationship and get them to run it. Do your own video at the event, and so you can, I'm not going to go too much into or really at all into social media, but if you can create a great 1-minute video, that could get out to as many people as that clip on the news. So don't rely on the press to come and create your media. Make that media for yourself and really use the media as a way to, the press as a way to amplify that messaging and that work that you're already doing. Like, oftentimes if there's I've had this happen on multiple occasions where a television station was interested in covering, but they weren't able to show up with a camera crew that day. Mm-hmm. And we were able to send them short video clips that then they integrated into their news coverage. They didn't pay us for using that, but we got that media that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah.
And then we were able in turn to be able to use and share that clip off of ABC and share that around and use that in our promotional material. And it all of a sudden became far more credible because it was framed by an existing media outlet than if it would have been just the 1-minute clip that we were presenting as our organization. Mm-hmm. So and so that's where like really quality comes in. The television station isn't, unless it's something really viral or like really plays in with the zeitgeist. And, like every once in a while, there'll be some phone clip, which is really good. For the most part, especially with these public interest stories, if possible, you want to send the highest quality video you can. For TV, turn your phone. If you're doing that, get widescreen if you can. For some, for Instagram and other things like that, you have to do it straight up and down. But if you're getting media specifically to try and send to a television station, try and get it in the format that's going to be best for them.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And
we created a YouTube channel. It was pretty easy. So I mean, I love you sharing that like as an option.
Yeah. Start that YouTube. You can get that out there. You post it kind of slightly different formats in Facebook and other things as well. And so some of them want to be square, and it kind of can get tricky. But do as much as you can. Don't try and get down on yourself for not posting in every single medium or for having to format your video for every single medium that's right. Do what you have the capacity for, and that's better than doing nothing. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes groups are like, well, I don't know exactly what to do, or I can't do all of it, so it's just overwhelming. But really just kind of start, do what you can and know that that's enough at the time.
Mm-hmm. Amanda just said podcasts. I don't know if you're going to speak to that, but those are amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I'm going to actually go into this around keeping the story alive right now. Okay. And so that's the next thing is that, media oftentimes begets more media. And, maybe sometimes you figure out, well, what is the lowest barrier to entry? And a great example of this from my own work is with the Asheville Tool Library, is that we were able to get in the weekly and get a small Q&A, interview in our local weekly in Asheville. And from that, we were able to get the Asheville Citizen Times, the local newspaper, to pick it up and do a story. Well, it just so happened that next week, there was a gap in the space that ABC News, had for a public interest story. And so they called me and said, hey, we saw your article in the paper. We need this story for tonight. Can you be on site in 20 minutes? Oh, wow. And I was like, whoa, I'm at work. I don't know if I can. Let me call around. And I wasn't able to make it there, but we was able to reschedule and say, okay, we'll get you in next week. Mm-hmm. And so these things all built one after another. And then, once we had gotten the weekly, the newspaper, and the television, story. Well, then it was like, well, how do we keep this going even further? And that's where we started getting on the radio, trying to do podcasts, keep it, and what happened though is that because I was working on a number of different projects in Nashville, I was able to build a relationship with one of the newspaper reporters, and they would start coming to me when they needed stories. And so sometimes maybe I didn't have something that was exciting that I thought was newsworthy in the moment, but I was like, oh, but hey, I know of this other project going on. And so I would send them over to other stories that was then supporting, my partners and friends and people that were, working on related or even unrelated projects that I happened to be supporting. But I was able to build myself as an asset to that reporter. Mm-hmm. So that over time they were going to continue to come for me to stories. I would always make sure I gave them a good story, and so that then all the stories that I presented to them were much more credible as a result. Mm-hmm. And so that's because we got on the one TV station, then another TV station, they wanted the story also, and so it kind of kept going. But it started with a local weekly, just like 100, 200 word interview in the weekly paper, and you're able to build from there. A great example that I want to just kind of touch on is, I don't know if anybody saw this story over the weekend around the Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. And these kind of youth climate activists that went and had a meeting with Dianne Feinstein on Friday, asking her to support the Green New Deal. And there's a shorter video which does not make Dianne Feinstein look very good at all. There's a longer one that has a little bit more context. Everything always has nuance. Even in the longer one, she still doesn't look like she didn't quite deal with it as well as she could have. But these kids, the two of these kids here in the front and three of the kids that were there are actually students who go to the school that I used to work at and are from the community that I live in. And I met with two of those students about a month ago, and they said, they were really inspired by Greta Thunberg and everything that was going on in Europe, and they were trying to figure out how they were going to bring that to the United States. These are 10, 12-year-old kids. Wow. And they were able to, through the Sunrise Movement, get this meeting with Dianne Feinstein. This video, this is a clip from, has gone viral, and there's been 10 million views since Friday. It got picked up by CNN, and The Guardian. And what they were able to do once they got national attention is they were able to do local media this weekend. And today they just finished a press release a press conference this morning. And they're using the coverage they've got to really, again, keep that story alive. They're building upon it. They're seizing the opportunities that are coming. And we're probably going to get more and more media over the course of this next week as a result. And it's been able to, one, kind of lift up the youth climate movement. And there's going to be a national student walkout and strike on March 15th. And so this is leading right into that. And so they were able to time the media very well. And so the story is going to continue. And also they were able to, have a direct conversation with the senator. And again, there's nuance to it. And she had her own opinions about why the Green New Deal is not workable. But because of the way that they're continuing to keep the story going, they're going to have a lot more impact.
Yeah. Interesting.
So with that, I just wanted to kind of have a few just points that I wanted to end with before we kind of go into a little bit more discussion. And the few things just to remember is, ask yourself, who you're trying to reach, and then work on the appropriate, make sure you have your appropriate kind of medium and language. And this is both for attracting that outlet and also, who are the people that are listening? Who are the people that are watching TV? How do you want to speak to them? And that's where so that leads then to framing and making sure that you're framing it so that the press would be interested, and also that those that you're speaking to will understand and be activated in one way or another how you want them to be. Take the time to build those relationships. It takes a while to build a relationship with the media outlets. You gotta send multiple stories, and make sure that you're delivering. You don't want to you want to underpromise and overdeliver, so that when they show up, the story is even better than they thought it was going to be. You don't want to say this thing is going to be amazing, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and they show up and there's 5 people at your event and your speakers aren't very interesting and your sound system is terrible, and you have no visuals and there's a bunch of clutter behind them and the whole thing, you want to make sure that you are really building that relationship through being courteous whenever you're talking to them, being understanding about their availability and lack thereof, providing high quality media assets, and again, making sure that you're delivering what you said you're going to.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, and then keep trying. Like most projects, you are rarely successful at getting the media attention they want the first time out. That it takes a while to build those relationships to, you might get a small blip, you might not get anything at all, and not to be discouraged, just to keep going with it. And then be ready. And this is the really important piece that's often lost, is that, be ready in case you're successful. Like, make sure your website is ready, your message is up front, that you have all of the, if you've got some report you're trying to distribute, if there is some sort of a campaign that you're launching, make sure all that stuff is there. If you build it, they will come. Mm-hmm. And if you're not ready when that media attention comes, it's lost. Like you want to have a direct link for people to take action, or to donate, or to do whatever it is that you're trying to get them to do, to sign up for your event. Make sure that information, once they get to your website, is as accessible as possible. Don't have it buried a bunch of clicks down. Make sure there's something that you've said, that you've said on the media is reinforced as soon as somebody comes to your website, as soon as somebody is at your event. Make it really, really easy to understand and connect with what you're doing, and connect what you've said between now what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yep. Thank you. I'm very much struck by what's coming through to me is just all of these different things that you've suggested that are, one, you said making their job easier, right? You're trying to give them all of this information, but just the importance of building a relationship and being able to do that so that your events and what you're trying to get out there, like, is a known, and they're going to listen to you as opposed to not. Yeah. 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 So I was, so questions from the group, comments, other things. I'm just also going back and looking at the chat. So I'll do that and then open it up, I guess, to the group, Tom. Yeah.
I think there's a few of us on here currently that I think we can just have a conversation.
Yeah. So you would have to take yourselves off mute. Yeah. You're more than welcome to speak. If anybody has any questions, comments, reflections, anything you're working on now where this might be helpful.
So just the idea again around op-eds popped up, and especially if you have some sort of an expertise, if you're representing your organization, if there's somebody in your organization that has the most expertise, op-eds are great. And that's a way to kind of establish yourself as a credible voice. Mm-hmm. And once you establish yourself as a credible voice and get op-eds placed, it's also much more likely that you're going to be able to attract other press to come to your event from that same outlet, because you've already been published in that paper. There's more likely they know who you are. They may still not know who you are, but it's greater. It's more likely that they will. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, podcasts. So podcasts I just want to go back to that really quickly. It's twofold. So it's one, the idea that you can create your own podcasts, and, the technology, the knowledge on how to do it, is becoming more and more accessible depending on what type of podcast you want to do. It can be very inexpensive. You can produce very expensive podcasts. Like we just recently, I produced one called The Response, which is about disaster collectivism, the ways that people have come together during and after disaster to offer mutual support, kind of regardless of kind of top-down NGO and government response, just the ways that people are doing it that are directly affected. And with that podcast, we chose specifically to produce it in a very professional manner. It's a documentary style. We framed it to be exactly 29 minutes, so we'd be able to get it on radio stations. And as a result, we were successful at getting on 140 radio stations across the country and averaging about 70 to 100,000 listens per episode.
Wow.
And it took months and months and months to produce. It was, between staff time and the time we spent on outside contractors and producers, we spent at least 30 grand, about 10, and just on 3 episodes, because it was a mini series. And so it was a major piece of our programmatic work. And with that said, you can spend $500 on equipment and software and go into a room and have a conversation and record that at a very, very low cost, and start speaking to your audience in a way that maybe they're going to interact with it, and again, that's something that, maybe they're going to not want to listen to an hour-long episode, but you start with something short and you figure out how you kind of make that media and use that as a means to try and attract other media. The other thing I was going to say around podcasts, though, is there's also the opportunity to get on existing podcasts and to be interviewed. And so that's another tool for kind of establishing yourself as an expert in some sort of a subject, is getting on podcasts. So if they're, it's a lot harder to get on national podcasts, but if there's some sort of local podcast that people are listening to, you can work on kind of getting in the back door in that way. And then once you start building up those local things, you can then go for larger and larger media outlets. Like oftentimes, you're not going to get on national television the first time out unless there's something extraordinary has happened.
Mm-hmm.
You build from lower level pieces, and then you work your way up.
Mm-hmm. So there's another question here. The best way to incorporate your organization marketing to your media pitch?
Yeah, I think it's a fine line that you have to walk, because when you are outreaching to the media, you want to sell yourself and you want to sell what you're doing as being worthy of their coverage. But you don't want to be too marketing-y. So shareable, like I said, we run a media outlet. I get pitches all the time. And the ones that sound like they're coming from a marketing agency, I delete. I don't even interact with it all. If I want substance. And so, you want to be really careful. So you can, have, you're going to have your marketing blurb, which is very succinctly and clearly explains who your organization is and what they do, your mission statement, your purpose statement. You're going to use that marketing language in your press release, in your media advisory, in your outreach. You're going to that's a great asset. You've already spent a lot of time working on that. But you're going to want to be careful about being overly salesy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Christania, do you want to speak this? This is a great question. Yeah.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Chris, and I was just curious about, ways that we might be able to leverage our relationships with each other, and particularly considering the ways in which we might be seeing, common threads through our stories and our narratives as similar sites. And just, when we have a site or a partner that's creating media and sharing it, things that we can do to make sure we're reading it, clicking through it, sharing it with our networks, and, just seeing those metrics help folks, see that our stories are worth covering and help us garner more interest in our story and our field. And are there other things that we can do to support each other by lifting up each other's stories and the successful media that we are able to get in a way that helps us, ultimately create a more collective vision and story for our field as a whole, or our sites as a whole?
Yes. I think that's the first answer is yes, and that's the cheapest way to get your message out there. So there are organizations that specialize in this specifically. For social media, especially with Facebook, there's an organization called Thunderclap, where you can, if you're going to have some sort of a big story coming out, you get as many of your supporters as possible to pre-sign up to share it. So you do a whole campaign. This can be to partners as well, and so that there is specific language that's going to get sent to these people. They're going to be prompted at this exact time to share the specific post. And so that's a service called Thunderclap. It's all going to go ahead of time. It is something that costs money. And so there's a way to do this for lower to no cost, is that you just team up with other organizations and partners to support each other, and ask your supporters to do it at a specific time, without using their service. As an organization, Shareable is part of one of these groups. There's a group that is called the Post Growth Alliance, which we're a member of, where we pay $100 a year to be able to have 4 posts get sent out to all of the other 100 organizations that are part of this alliance. And everybody in the alliance agrees, not to repost and send out every single piece, because they're not always relevant to their work or their audience, but to be generous and to share out those pieces as much as possible. And as a result, a number of our pieces that have gone out through the service have gotten thousands more views than they would have otherwise, at a very low cost. And again, this is something that you can make agreements with each other to do something very similar, where, if there is some sort of a big piece of information, it's not the kind of thing where, every week would you resend out our newsletter. You want to be strategic, because it gets overwhelming and people aren't going to send out things all the time. But with our group, we have 4 posts a year that can go to this alliance that then get the treatment and sent out. And that if there's, 9, 10, 11 of these groups, 15 of these groups, they're all part of here that all said, yes, when you have this big piece of news, we will send it out in our newsletter, include it in there, and share the social media. That's really the best way to break through, Facebook and Twitter and everything else. That I think the average Facebook post gets seen by 1 to 3% of your viewership at this point in time. Wow. If you just post something, it'll go through 1 to 3% of the feed, unless you're paying for it to be sponsored, for the post to come up, and then it'll go through 10 or 15%, depending on how much money you spend. So the best way really to get out there and to kind of break the algorithm is you kind of have to create your own click farm. What have we seen with all these different foreign posts that are just going viral, and all the fake news and all that sort of thing? Well, the reason why they're able to do that is that there's lots of people or bots that are all sharing, liking, and sharing the pieces. And it makes it more likely for other people to see it. It gets higher rankings in the search algorithm because there's so many people seeing it. So whatever you post will do far better if other organizations, if other credible sites are also sharing that piece.
Fascinating. And I have a question, but I'm not sure if it's going to make any sense, because I'm just thinking about the groups that are on, and one of the groups is this Accountable Community for Health, or you've got health departments who are all doing this great work. And there's this notion of the value proposition, right? Of what it is that they're doing that is creating value, and that somebody might be interested and somebody may want to pay for it. I'm using that term in a variety of different ways. So I was kind of struck by Christania's question, and just made me think about, just how important this is, right? Because the work that they're doing is good, but a lot of what I think you're saying also is just how you're framing it, right, in such a way, right, that's going to demonstrate that. So anyway, I don't know if it's a question or just a...
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where it takes work to do this. Yeah. Like, just because you're doing something that's great and that's maybe totally media worthy doesn't mean you're going to get any media.
Yeah.
Like unless you put out the time and make sure you're reaching out to reporters and getting the story out, you can't just sit back and expect the media attention to come. And I gave that example at the beginning, is I ran the Sustainable Living Roadshow for 4 years, traveling nationally. We did hundreds of events and did big marches and all sorts of things. And we got very little media attention because we didn't have someone that was their job. Yeah. And we didn't make that a priority. And we could have, increased our impact tenfold if we had done that at the time. Reached, far more people that weren't able to come to our events. And so it really is an opportunity to get out there. So we got a new question that come up. If we don't hear from a reporter, anchor, or producer, should we look to contact news director or executive producer directly? If you can get that information, absolutely. Go up the chain, go to the side of the chain. If there's other producers and and sidestep around and say, hey, oh, I sent this to so-and-so, and I haven't heard back, but this is something I think is really valuable and would make a great segment. Please let me know if there's somebody else that I should talk to. And that's also a great always thing to include is, hey, I think you're the right person I should be contacting about this. In case you're not, please let me know who I should contact in general or forward this along. And again, the squeaky wheel really does get the grease. And you don't want to be aggressive. You don't want to be like, hey, I emailed you last week and I never heard from you. Hey, you didn't return my phone call. That's not going to get you any points. You want to be really understanding and say, hey, I understand that you're busy. I understand you get a lot of these things. I don't mean to be a pest, but we have this thing coming up. I think it would make a really great, a great segment. Here's the things I think we could do. Hey, I emailed you last week. I know I've emailed you a couple of times, but the reason why I'm staying on top of this is because da-da-da-da-da, and just be very understanding. And if you're personable and you, don't, and again, media shouldn't be expected. It's a benefit. It's something that you kind of have to work for and celebrate when it comes. But if you come with some sense of entitlement about how your project is the best project and your event's gonna be the best thing, and they're fools if they miss out, they're not going to appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Tom, I'm wondering, you've mentioned thunderclap, you mentioned meltwater.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if part of what you're going to send, I'm actually I've got this list of all different kinds of media. I'm using that term loosely.
Mm-hmm.
There's, if you want to do email newsletters, he has mail, constant contact.
Sure.
Do you have resources that we could share with the group in terms of different types of communication methodologies that, a lot of them you do have to pay for, probably in some way, that could be shared, or is that on the shareable site? Or
yeah, I can do kind of a short list in my follow-up email with you. Yep.
Great. Very good. Other questions? And you can ask the question, you don't have to just do it through chat.
This is Deborah. I just have a question around media release, particularly on the same day press when you do media. I've done it where I've done a media release for participants, and I have seen signs at events. Do you have a best practice around that, and how you manage that on site?
On site, so that would be something that I would have a media liaison, just being the coordinator for that on site if possible. And then I still want to just clarify your question around press releases for participants. What was if you could just go in a little bit more detail about your question.
Yeah, I'm involved in a conference that brings about 500 youth together, and we might have, say, 25 out of that 500 who do not or cannot be photographed. So yes. I was just wondering if you had a best practice. We usually do linears, like red means that you can't be photographed, and we let the media know about that. But I was wondering if there was any other types of best practices out there to manage it on the day of, because it still gets kind of confusing.
Sure. So that's, what you just said is a great way to go. That makes it a lot simpler as opposed to having every single person sign a release form as you take their photos. It's good, especially if you have an Eventbrite or some sort of a registration, to have a disclaimer on the thing saying, everybody, just so you know, there will be photos and video taken, by registering, you are opting in, you are giving consent to have your photo or video taken. If for some reason you are uncomfortable with this or whatever else, click this button and you can opt out. And then you get your list of those folks that are not able to have their photo taken. And then what you just suggested about having some sort of a lanyard, which designates those folks that don't want to be on video or photos, is a really easy tool to do that. The other way to do it is if you, especially, then to be a little bit more proactive, like you're going to have a certain number of folks that you want to be spokespeople, that maybe they're youth spokespeople for this event or others. And then those people you want to make sure, one, that they know that you're spokespeople and have their talking points down, but two, that you also, are to get some sort of a photo video release if you don't have an automatic opt-in as part of your registration.
That's a great idea. So Tom, there's one more question that's in here, and I know we wanted to spend like a minute or two on the social isolation loneliness piece. So this question is, I know target audiences, where'd it go? And objectives are important factors. What medium have you found give you the best ROI, like TV, radio, print, social media? And then there's also this data analytics, which I think is really important when trying to convince the media. So kind of there's two. Javier is chatty today. That's very exciting. I like that. And really good questions.
Yeah. I would say that, if you can get TV, like you want to try and get TV, but it's because then you can, it's video that you can use on social media. It feeds your other work, other things, and once you get TV, it's easier to get other media outlets. But again, sometimes you got to go up the chain. So it's the getting it in the local paper and having a piece, being able to use that to be able to get radio and TV afterwards is typically the easiest way to go. Because you get a certain amount of credibility, because print media still has more credibility than many other sources, more than social media, so I would start there if possible. If you're able to get a news story, that seems like the kind of, it's a medium list, but it gives you a pretty good return. If you're able to get a billboard, do it, but they're tend to be expensive. I mean, you can, and ways that I've gotten around this is when I worked on campaigns is we had a box truck for one of the organizations I worked with, and we painted the entire side of the box truck. It was a 36-foot box truck, and we painted it to be a billboard, and we were able to drive that thing around. We were able to park it at strategic locations above highways, all these different things, and we're able to create our own billboard at a fraction of the cost of what it would have been to pay for renting a billboard and for printing the signage and all the rest of it. So you can get creative.
Yeah, that's awesome. It'd be a great youth project, right?
Yep.
Like thinking about getting kids involved and getting the message out, that would be amazing. Right?
And if you can somehow sponsor a mural project and have, messaging be integrated in the mural project, I mean, that's also a great news story to work off of. There's different ways of achieving that billboard effect. Without actually having to pay for it and doing some of that kind of guerrilla media. So another great idea. And then this other question around
data analytics.
Analytics. And what do you mean specifically, what types of analytics are you thinking of? Javier.
Yeah, if you want to take yourself off, I'll mute. Oh, views, yours. Okay.
So as an organization, views and shares. You could say that. So, I would use it if it's good. If you have received 1 million views on Facebook of your video, that is something that's worth including in your pitch. If you have, 200 tickets sales already, the number of people, in your media advisory, when you're sending that out, if you've got an estimate that's a true estimate, again, you want to overpromise and you want to underpromise and overdeliver, not the other way around. So you don't want to say, we're going to have 1,000 people there because you're hoping that 1,000 people are going to show up and you only have 100 people confirmed. You want to be honest and you want to sell. But if you got a great number, if you're in a town of 20,000 people, and you've got 1,000 people coming to your event, like that's huge.
Yeah.
That's a really big percentage of the population. Recently I co-produced an event in the UK in Totnes. It was a full day sharing festival, and we had 800 people show up in a town of 8,000.
Wow.
So 10% of the population came and participated in one way or another throughout the day. And that was a great news story. That was something that then they were able to use those numbers and go after local media after the fact to continue reinforcing the messaging of the event. And so sometimes you can use those analytics ahead of time if you've really got some strong ones, or again, if you can go after the fact and say, hey, this is how many people were here, this is what happened, and use it in that way.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So do you want to just wrap it up by sharing a bit about your new event and just to...
Sure. So, just real quick, as I said, so Shareable's a media outlet, but we also do various advocacy work, and we do a number of different projects. And the most recent project that we're working on, we're doing a whole series on social isolation, loneliness, and civic disconnection. And from this, just a 2017 report found that the average American only has one close friend. This was down from in the early 80s. A similar study was done that found there was the average American had 3 close friends. So we're looking, in about 30 years, gone down from 3 to 1. And if you think about the average American having only one close friend, think about how many Americans have no close friends. How many people have nobody that they can rely on in that sort of way to process, important life decisions and hiccups, and, bail them out of jail, whatever it may be, people to really show up for each other. And so, this is not only the United States, it's also very similar in the UK and Japan. Korea has a whole, really kind of loneliness epidemic at this point in time in South Korea. And as a result, a number of different municipal, governments are creating new positions. The UK has the Minister of Loneliness, and it's really seen as a public health crisis. I think there's a recent study that found that loneliness can be worse than smoking over nearly a pack of cigarettes a day. Wow. And it's associated with greater risks around heart disease and dementia and depression and anxiety. And so as we continue to get kind of more closed off from each other, we're more likely, one, to become ill ourselves, but also it's having really dire effects that are rippling through the civic space, through people tuning out, othering in really historic ways, leading to things like Brexit, where that came in part because there was so much disconnection between people, and that there was a study that was done post the vote to leave, that found that people that interacted during the course of their day with somebody of foreign descent, that was of a different race than themselves, were far less likely to vote to leave than others that were within a similar cohort, within a similar demographic. And so it's this lack of interaction with each other that are really leading to some of these larger kind of civic issues. So we're going to be kind of unpacking that through a series of a big feature story and a number of op-eds and how-to guides and Q&As and all that sort of thing over the next couple of months. And then we're going to have an open event at San Francisco State University on April 10th that we will both be people in person, and we'll also be recording it and live streaming the whole event as well. And so we're going to be launching our kind of Eventbrite and all that sort of thing by the end of this week. And I'll make sure that gets sent out as well.
Great. Thanks so much. That's awesome. There's one last question. I think, what time is it? So it's 3.
Yep.
If folks want to stay, that's great. And hopefully, Tom, do you have time for this one
Yep,
last question?
definitely.
Okay. So is it considered unethical if I serve as a multimedia journalist for my organization and package the story and do so objectively, of course, and deliver it to the news outlets directly, essentially doing the job for them?
No, not at all. And again, it's their job, the media outlet's job to check sources and do the fact checking and all that sort of thing. It really is, to your benefit to pretty much, again, that's like where that press release comes in, where you write it as if it is a news story for the most part. And if you're able to, and typically what happens is if they were to repost your story word for word, they would add a disclaimer saying this piece was written by so-and-so who's part of this organization. We at Shareable, that's what we do. Whenever there is a piece that's a promotional piece for an organization that was written by it, we're very clear that that's who it's written by. If we do some piece that was sponsored, whether or not we write it or if it's coming from one of our sponsors, we're very clear. And as long as you're clear about that, then there's no ethical breaches.
Great. This was amazing. Yeah, this was great. So thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to all of those resources, and then we will post that on the website.
Yep. So I will be sending out, we'll send out this recording, and then we will also send out a PDF of this presentation, a sample press release, a sample news advisory, that sample letter to a television producer, and then also a few other resources that I'm going to send to Sue, and she's going to compile it along with her other kind of media and communications resources.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for
Bye,
having me.
everybody.
This is great.
Mm-hmm.